Have you ever wondered why, no matter the occasion, birthday, funeral, boardroom, or casual dinner, one person always seems to hijack the moment, twist every conversation back to themselves, and react with fury or meltdown when the spotlight dares to stray? Maybe you've witnessed someone who can turn even your joy or pain into a stage for their own drama, sucking up all the air in the room while those around them shrink, apologize, and question their own worth. What if I told you that behind the scenes of this relentless attention seeking lies something far more desperate, more dangerous, and more tragic than just arrogance? A wounded, insatiable hunger that can destroy relationships, families, even entire communities? Why can't they share the stage, even for a moment? Why does every crowd, every triumph, every crisis become just another episode in their endless quest to be seen, adored, envied, worshipped? Tonight, I'm stripping away the masks and exposing the raw, unnerving truth about why narcissists always need to be the center of attention, the pain they're fleeing, the lives they consume, and the impossible emptiness they're desperately trying to fill. If you're ready to discover not just the what, but the searing why, if you want to finally stop blaming yourself and start seeing the hidden machinery beneath the show, stay with me, because what you're about to hear will forever change how you look at attention, validation, and the real price of living in someone else's shadow. To truly grasp why narcissists always need to be the center of attention, you must first stare deep into the abyss that is their psyche, a place that, despite all its blustering confidence and showmanship, is haunted by a gaping wound that can never quite be healed, a hollow yearning so profound that every moment out of the spotlight is experienced as existential threat, not mere discomfort, and the roots of this compulsion trace back to childhoods marked either by deprivation, where love and mirroring were rare and always conditional, or by excessive indulgence, where the child was praised as flawless royalty, entitled to a starring role no matter the script. In either case, what is forged is not a robust, resilient sense of being, but a brittle false self, an imagined persona, whose entire value, security, and right to exist hinge on the reflected glare of other people's attention, admiration, and awe, so desperately constructed, in fact, that even the briefest lapse in attention feels like a shattering abandonment or a violent invalidation, and life itself becomes a never-ending campaign to reclaim, maintain, and defend the spotlight by any means necessary, no matter the collateral damage. Within this psychological crucible, every interaction is weaponized in the narcissist's desperate hunt for narcissistic supply, a volatile blend of applause, fear, envy, adoration, or even contempt, because positive or negative, all attention feeds the insatiable void within, while every room is scanned for threats, those who might outshine them, and opportunities, those pliant enough to provide the validation they crave. Their need to be the center is not a harmless quirk, but the axis around which all their relationships, ambitions, and even daily moods rotate. They monopolize conversations, interrupt to redirect praise to themselves, inflate their accomplishments, minimize or sabotage the achievements of others, play the perpetual victim if sympathy will draw more focus, or explode into rage or melodrama when eclipsed, always certain that the world's gaze is not just desirable, but necessary for their psychological survival, a survival that takes precedence over truth, fairness, intimacy, and sometimes even the well-being of those closest to them. Tragically, and here lies the painful cognitive dissonance for those ensnared by the narcissist, their magnetism and theatrical flair can initially be deeply seductive, especially in cultures that equate charisma, confidence, or self-promotion with strength or worth, because a narcissist's hunger often masquerades as vision, leadership, or charm. But over time, the mask slips, and loved ones, friends, co-workers, and even casual bystanders are forced into supporting roles in the narcissist's relentless pursuit for applause, draining their own emotional reserves and eroding their sense of worth, as every gathering, celebration, or crisis is hijacked and recast as a stage for the narcissist's narrative. The devastation is twofold. Not only are others continually co-opted, dismissed, or destroyed for daring to refocus the spotlight or set their own needs above the narcissist's, but the narcissist themselves is condemned to a cycle of escalating desperation. When the applause ebbs, when the room grows cold, when admiration is diverted to a rival, or the crowd is bored, the narcissist's fragile false self totters on the brink, triggering a torrent of anxiety, irritability, and sometimes even catastrophic collapse, known in clinical circles as narcissistic injury, which can fuel panic, depression, vindictiveness, or acts of reckless self-sabotage meant to shock the world and themselves back to the rightness of their centrality. Excruciatingly, those close to the narcissist often internalize this script. Partners learn to sacrifice their desires, talents, or happiness to keep the peace. Children are raised to orbit an emotionally hungry parent, never seen for themselves, always shamed or dismissed if their brilliance threatens to eclipse the master performer. And teams or families fracture under the relentless pressure of pretending one person matters above all, leaving in their wake a trail of broken relationships, lost potential, and emotional exhaustion. The narcissist, all the while, oscillates between giddy triumph and bitter emptiness, bewildered by the fact that every fresh triumph, every room conquered, every cheer wrung from reluctant lips, only leaves them lonelier, more anxious, more certain that without constant worship, they will slip into oblivion, erasure, or the existential terror of being ordinary. The manipulation can be dazzling, and tragically, so can the self-deception. When outshone, ignored, or simply faced with a world that refuses to bow, narcissists will create drama, starting arguments from thin air, weaponizing secrets, or inventing crises just to reclaim center stage, even if it means casting themselves as martyr or villain, so long as the spotlight returns. Worse yet, this endless cycle is turbocharged by social environments that reward spectacle over substance, workplaces that favor grandstanding executives, families that excuse explosive behavior for the sake of peace, friend groups that confuse manipulation with leadership, or media landscapes that turn narcissism into mass entertainment, reinforcing the myth that value equals visibility, not integrity or connection. The collateral damage is immense. In their desperate bid for attention, narcissists can never allow for true intimacy, authentic empathy, or genuine two-way connection, since to admit anyone else's reality as equally important is to threaten the entire ego edifice they've so laboriously constructed. And so, they remain forever isolated, hungry, surrounded by an audience, but incapable of experiencing actual love, respect, or belonging, haunted always by the suspicion that the adoration isn't real, that any moment of being ignored or challenged will expose a hollow core that feels unworthy and unlovable. For those trapped in their orbit, the experience is often traumatizing, forcing endless accommodation, rationalization, and loss of self, leading to lasting confusion, anxiety, and doubts about one's own worth or sanity. But, and here's the brutally clear, sobering educational truth, this compulsion to be the center is not always easy to spot at first, nor is it reserved only for the cartoonish showboats who obviously demand attention. It can be as subtle as the victim-martyr narrative always pulling sympathy, the quiet sabotage of another's celebration, the benign jealousy disguised as concern, or the endless fishing for compliments cloaked as self-deprecation. Sometimes we are wrong and mistake ordinary confidence, resilience, or an understandable need for reassurance for narcissism, especially in a culture obsessed with likes and applause. So the challenge is to look for patterns. Is their attention-seeking chronic, relentless, escalating, and always at the expense of others? Are apologies real and rare, or performative and transactional? Do you feel listened to, valued, and safe, or always like a secondary character, a supplier, a competitor, or a threat? The agony of recognizing, then grappling with, a full-blown narcissist is the realization that, despite all your efforts, empathy, or love, their need for the spotlight is a bottomless pit that can never be filled. Your praise, sympathy, or even your outrage will only ever feed the cycle, never cure the wound. The final, crystal clear, unvarnished lesson is that the narcissist's quest for attention is less a choice than an addiction, less about you and your shortcomings than about a hunger that can never be satisfied, rooted in a developmental trauma that warped the very blueprint of selfhood, and the only escape, both for you and for the narcissist, if ever possible, lies not in endless accommodation or clever strategizing, but in the painful, courageous act of setting boundaries, reclaiming your own spotlight, and refusing to mistake their noise for love or their pain for your responsibility. Only then, when you stop revolving your life around the black hole of their need, can you begin to heal, to grow, and, possibly, just possibly, to help them glimpse, even fleetingly, the liberating possibility that true worth is found not in attention, but in the messy, beautiful, mutual vulnerability of real human connection, a lesson most narcissists spend their lives fleeing, and a hope their loved ones dare not abandon, even as they step out of the glare, at last, for their own survival.